In this video, we will show you how to replace your ignition distributor on this Chevy Silverado with a 4.3 liter engine. This will be located along the top rear of your engine. Let's get into it. Okay friends, let's get started on our job. The first thing we need to do is make our way to the negative battery terminal. We'll be using an 8mm to remove this and set it aside. The next thing we have to do is have our engine on top dead center. That will be easiest to do if you remove the fan shroud from the area. For the fan shroud itself, it's going to have 4 push clips, 2 along each side. To remove your push clips, you carefully start pulling out the center to unlock it, and then you remove the outer portion as well to fully remove it. A quick inspection set it aside. Let's get this next one here. Okay, that's this side of the vehicle. Let's do the exact same thing on the other side of the shroud, and then we'll continue with our 2 10mm headed bolts. Next one. Let's get these 10mm bolts out of here. Take hold of this, carefully lift it up, being careful not to cause any damage to your radiator located along the front of this. A quick inspection and we'll set it aside. To remove the lower portion of this shroud, go ahead and take hold of it and roll it up and out of the way, once again paying attention to that radiator. The next thing we'll have to do is align our timing marks on the crank pulley itself and the engine. Now I already have these marked off. The areas that need to align, you have the blue areas along the top here, and then down along the bottom, I've also marked that position. Typically these won't be properly aligned. You're going to have to turn the crank with a 16mm clockwise until they are. We want to make sure the engine's on top dead center on cylinder 1 on the compression stroke. The way you can tell it's on the compression stroke is because the engine will get harder to turn over. We'll make our way right down here, find that center mounting bolt, and now we'll start turning this clockwise, only clockwise. Right now it's fairly easy to turn. It's getting a little harder. I can feel it wants to turn back as soon as I release. Now it's easy again. Let's pay attention to those alignment marks. So right there, I just saw the yellow go by. That yellow one is the first marking, which will align down at the bottom there. As we bring this down to its alignment point down there, we should also see the blue marking make its way around as well. And there's the blue marking right there. You want to make sure you have it as close to aligned as possible while on the compression stroke on cylinder 1. In this area, we'll be loosening this clamp with an 8mm or flathead screwdriver. You don't need to completely dislodge it, you just need to have a little bit of movement here. Go ahead and separate this. A quick inspection of each part, and we'll continue on just behind that. Take hold of this hose, give it a little wiggle, and slide it off. Make sure that's soft and pliable. In this area, you're going to find a plastic wing nut. Turn this counterclockwise and remove it. Now we can take hold of this and carefully start lifting it up and off of here. Go ahead and set that aside. Continuing on, we'll make sure that we cover the port leading into the engine. Now it's going to be time to start removing the distributor from the engine. When you go to do so, we're going to be starting with the spark plug wires. Let's have a look at the new distributor. It already has a cap along the top, and each one of these ports is where the spark plug wires will go. Having a quick look at this, I want to let you know ahead of time. On the passenger side, which is the side that has the 4 ports, the forward spark plug will be the forward mounting point. The middle spark plug is the center, and the rearward spark plug on the passenger side is the rear port. As for this one right here, this is the coil wire. It's a completely separate wire. You really can't mix it up. Now here's where you really need to pay attention to. Looking along the driver's side of the distributor cap, when you go to disconnect the wires, you're going to find that the forward port actually leads to the center spark plug. The center port will lead to the forward spark plug, and the rear port just directly leads to that rearward spark plug. So those are really the only 2 that you have to pay attention to. Once you know exactly where each one of the spark plug wires goes to, we'll continue on to removing them from the distributor cap. You can start on whichever side you'd like. I'll be over on the passenger side, starting along the rear with that coil wire. As you remove each and every one of these, give them a close inspection. If you see any funny colors, it's corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. We are. We'll set all these aside and do the exact same thing on the other side of the distributor cap. Now we can start removing the distributor cap from the area. The distributor cap is held in place with 2 T20 screws. There's one along the back side, and there's one along the front side of the distributor cap. Go ahead and loosen up each of these, and then we'll remove the cap from the area. All right, that one's nice and loose. We'll do the exact same thing to the forward bolt. All right, let's get the cap out of here. We'll just give this a quick inspection and set it aside. With the cap out of the way, we'll continue on with our electrical connector. For this, you just want to go ahead and lift up on that locking tab, pull it out of place, and give it a quick inspection. Once again, we're looking for corrosion. That would be a bad sign. Now, before we can remove the distributor, it's important to make 2 markings. The first marking that we want to pay attention to, we're going to be locating this tab right along here, which is where your electrical current will go through, and you want to mark on the distributor base exactly where it lines up with. The angle of the camera right here makes it look like it's a little bit off, but realistically, if you were to look straight down at it, you're going to find that it makes its way straight down to this portion of the base. Really don't have to make too much of a marking, but I'll do it just for good measure. Once you have the rotor marked in comparison to the base, the next thing that we have to do is mark the base of the distributor in comparison to the engine. On this particular distributor, you don't necessarily have to make this marking because the lockdown clip is adhered to the distributor itself. But commonly you do make this marking, so we're going to do it for good measure. In this case, we'll be working along the back side of the distributor, over on the driver's side there. It's easier to make a mark. With the distributor properly marked, we'll continue on with removing the one 10mm headed bolt that holds the distributor down to the engine. That's going to be located along the passenger side of the distributor. You can see the bolt right here. To gain access to this, you may have to use a ratcheting wrench. Just make my way right back here. There's our mounting bolt. A quick inspection and we'll set this aside. You will be reusing it. Now that we have the mounting hardware out of there, take hold of the distributor base. We're going to start lifting this straight up and out of the engine. As you do so, you're going to find that the center portion here, the rotor of the distributor, is going to start to spin on you. It's important to make sure that once you start lifting this up, watching it spin, as soon as it stops spinning, make sure you mark the base of the distributor exactly where the electrode faces to, just like we did before. I'm going to make the marking in a separate color. I can see that starting to pivot here. Nice and easy. As I was lifting it up, I could see it pivoting and then it stopped. As I mentioned, we're going to make sure we mark the base of the distributor in this spot before we continue lifting it up and out. All right, let's get this out of here. There it is, friend. Let's quickly compare the brand new distributor to the original. You'll find that they look exactly the same. The only thing we have to do is remake our markings that we have on the original on the new distributor. Let's start with the marking that we had made on the original in yellow. You can see that it's just beyond this small ear here. We'll make sure that we have the new distributor in the same orientation on the bench as the original and make that marking. Got my yellow crayon here. You can use anything to mark it that makes you happy. Now that we have that area marked on the new distributor, let's also pay attention to the original marking. Looking at the original distributor, we can see it's right over here. And looking at the base, as I mentioned before, it's pretty much on that triangular portion. So with that said, we'll continue on by making the marking in the same area on the new distributor. I can see it right along there. Perfect. Now that we have the new distributor marked, we're going to install the distributor with the electrode facing towards the yellow marking here, closest to that ear. When we do slide it into the completely bottomed out position on the engine, you should find that the rotor itself aligns with the original marking, the first one that we made. If for some reason it doesn't, maybe it's a little off kilter to one side or the other, you need to carefully lift up on the whole distributor, base and everything, and then turn that rotor in one direction or the other as needed. Continue on sliding it down. Once it does properly align with the original first marking, you can continue on with your mounting hardware. Let's have a look at the brand new distributor and ensure that we do have our gasket in place close to the base here. Just go ahead and press it right up on there. Now we can prepare to install our distributor. When we go to do so, we need to pay attention to our markings. You remember along the top, we have the distributor rotor, which can rotate. We made a marking where it needs to end up, and we also made a marking where it had stopped as we had lifted it up. It's important to note that you have to start at that position as when we had lifted it up. If you're turned even one tooth to the wrong direction, it's going to cause an issue. When you go to fully install this and the mounting bolt is fully aligned, if it looks like your marking's off, like I said, even that far, you're going to have a running condition and your vehicle may not even start. Take your time. Here we go. Now as we come down, I'm making sure that I align that rotor. This is extremely important. At the same time as I'm aligning the rotor, I'm also trying to eyeball the base there. Like I said, if we're off by a tiny bit, it can make a huge difference. Take your time. Okay, let's continue pressing this down. Align the mounting bolt hole. And now a thorough inspection. We need to ensure that we are aligned. I've said this a couple times. One last time. Make sure you're aligned. If you are not, continue on by lifting up on the distributor, turn that rotor one direction or the other a tiny bit, and continue on sliding it down into the proper position. Ensure that you're aligned, and then you can continue with that mounting hardware down along the bottom. Now that we've confirmed that we are properly aligned, we'll continue on with our 10mm headed mounting bolt. Go ahead and take this and start it in position, snug it up, confirm that you are still aligned, and then torque that down to 18 foot-pounds. Now we can torque this. The torque is 18 foot-pounds. That converts to 216 inch-pounds. We'll just get our inch-pound wrench in here. Now that we have that mounted, let's make our way to that electrical connector. Press it in, listen for a click. Go ahead and give it a little tug to make sure it's completely secured in place. It's time to install the distributor cap. We'll make sure we have it in the proper positioning so we have the area with the 4 plug wires facing towards the passenger side of the vehicle. We'll get it in position, align our mounting bolt holes, and start in each of those 2 small mounting bolts. Careful not to drop these along the back side of the engine. That can be problematic. We'll use a T20 Torx bit to snug these up, and then we can torque them to 21 inch-pounds. It's not very much. There we are. Now it's time for the spark plug wires. We'll start with the coil wire, which is around the center of the engine here. Go ahead and take this and bring it down along the side of the engine, underneath the bracket, and all the way to the back prong on the passenger side of the distributor cap. Slide this right back there. When you go to install these, it's a good idea to use a tiny bit of dielectric lubricant. We'll just slide this right on there. Double check to make sure it's completely seated up against the base. We'll give it a light wiggle to ensure that it is properly secured and continue on with the rest of our spark plug wires. Starting with the front spark plug wire on the passenger side. We'll follow that wire. Confirm we have the proper wire. Now for the passenger side, this forward wire will be on the forward prong on the distributor cap, the forward port. Once again, pressing it on, a quick wiggle. Continue on down along the passenger side. The center spark plug wire will go to the center port, and the rearward wire will go to the rearward port that's just forward of the coil wire. Got my third wire. We'll just confirm everything is secured on the passenger side of the distributor cap. Now we'll make our way to the driver's side. You're going to have to pay attention to the wiring sequence. For the passenger side, starting with the forward spark plug wire, this time the spark plug wire will go on the center port on the driver's side of the distributor cap. We'll press that in. The middle wire will go on the forward port. And now the rear spark plug wire goes on the rear port on the driver's side of the distributor cap. One last confirmation while we're back here to ensure everything is properly installed. This looks perfect. Now we can install the fan shroud. Before we start bringing it down into position, if you were to look along the rear of the radiator, you'll find that it does have two tabs that protrude out. They're small hooks. We'll take this shroud and gently rest it down into those hooked areas. As we bring this down, you want to be extremely careful not to cause any damage to the radiator. Let's pay attention to those hooked areas. Continuing on to the upper fan shroud, we'll just rest this one in position along the bottom. You should find that on each side it does have an alignment tab that will fit up through this corresponding hole. As long as it's aligned as it should be, you should be able to install each of your push clips, 2 along each side of the fan shroud. Same on the other side. Now we'll continue on to our 2 10mm headed mounting bolts up along the top. Start them in, snug them up. Right there is bottomed out. We'll just make sure it's snug. Confirm the fan shroud is properly secured to the vehicle. Now it's time for the air intake. When you go to put this in position, along the bottom of the air intake, you'll find that you have a hooked area that needs to fit around the forward edge of the throttle body. Once it has, we'll roll this down and align the mounting point. With it in place, we'll snug it up with that wing nut in the center. Make sure that's nice and tight. Let's get this in place. Now we can install the rest of our intake. Let's get this in position. There we are, tight fit. Let's pause there, make our way to the other end. This portion will make its way to the upper air filter housing. You want to make sure that this aligns as you continue pressing it in. You may have to try to twist things as needed. There we are. Once you feel as though you have it bottomed out, continue on with tightening each one of those 2 clamps with your 8mm. Confirm each of them are tight. You don't want any dirty or unmetered air making its way into the engine. Let's reconnect in our mass airflow sensor. Once you do press this into position, lock it in with your gray locking tab. I got a nice click from that. We'll give it a tug, lock it down. Reconnect your negative battery terminal. Start it in, snug it up with your 8mm. Double check to make sure it's completely secured. Okay friend, we finished the installation of our distributor. At this point, go ahead and start up the vehicle, let it get up to normal operating temperature. Once you've done so, you want to make sure that you have no check engine light, no misfire, and check the timing of your vehicle. After that, go ahead and take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.